Welcome to You and the Law. I'm your host, Jeannine Cordero, member of the Chicago Bar Association, and we're back for part 2 with Olga Pribyl and Margie Wakeland from Equip for Equality to talk about transition planning. What's transition planning? If you have a child with special needs in the public school system and that child has an IEP, an individual educational plan, you need to talk about transition at the 14th birthday. And so we are going to delve into how you can be an effective advocate for your child when drafting this transition plan. So welcome back.
Thank you.
So let's go into advocacy tips that you have for parents and students regarding transition planning. Let's talk about how we can be good advocates for our children.
I think the most important thing is for parents and students to become informed about what the law requires, what their rights are, to gather information about what a transition plan is, and then also about outside agencies that can assist once the student graduates. So it's, and a lot of regular transition, advocacy tips that you would normally do for other components of the IEP apply as well. Keeping in contact with the school, making sure that you attend the meetings, and being an active participant, both the student and the parent.
Well, and then besides being an active parent, and hopefully, as we talked about earlier, you can help your child put together some goals. Do they want to work after school? Do they want to go to community college? Do they want to go to a four-year college? What are their strengths and weaknesses, capabilities, and such? But if I'm trying to understand what my rights are as a parent, or to get some guidance on the types of things that might go into a transition plan, schools aren't always the best at guiding parents towards those resources, or they give kind of a broad brush often. Can we talk about where a parent can go for more specific information that might help them?
Sure, they can come to Equip for Equality. So Margie can talk about a module that we developed on our website to help parents and students with transition planning.
Great.
Right, so the module is available on our website, which is www.equipforequality.org. And the goal of the module is to put transition at the forefront of IEP planning. So for students who are 14 and a half or beyond, transition really, the goals that student has for when they leave high school, those need to drive what the student is doing day to day. So this module helps the student and his or her parents go through the process of each of the steps. So identifying what those specific post-secondary goals are, then identifying where there are additional assessments needed to determine what the student's skills are, what their interests are, and where those mesh with the specific goals they have. And then going through and identifying what the student's course of study should be, and also identifying what sort of skills they need to learn while they're in school and what those services are going to be that the school provides to them to realize those specific goals. So the module goes through step by step and gives examples for families, because we found that families often they struggle because they don't know what is possible. And so we have examples on there about each step of the transition plan. We also have videos that are attorneys who are speaking about the different aspects of the transition plan. And at the very end, once you've gone through each step, you develop a report, your own transition plan for your child, or if your child is filling it out themselves, that you can then take into the meeting that you're having where you're developing the annual IEP. And you can actually say, this is where I want to start the meeting. And that's really a primary advocacy tip that I have for parents, is to say, as opposed to, I've been in many IEP meetings. I don't even want to say how many, but where we've discussed transition, and oftentimes it just comes at the end, and everyone's tired after going
Right.
through all the different steps of it, and it's sort of an afterthought, especially when the student is on the younger side. But that's where it's so important, because that's where you're thinking about what you have the time to plan. So we say that transition really needs to be the first thing, and then it needs to drive what are the goals, what are the accommodations and modifications, what are the testing, what is going to be provided in that IEP.
That's great. And it's free.
It is.
Right.
Yes, it's free, and there's also a version in Spanish,
Excellent.
and it has a lot of other accessibility features.
And we also, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Jeannine.
No.
We also have parent-friendly tip sheets or fact sheets. So we have one specifically on transition planning. So people can make a copy of that, review that, and bring that with them to the IEP meeting. And then we always have the helpline, so they should feel free to call us and ask us any questions they have, because we're really there to provide information and advice about legal rights for families and students.
That's great. And about how long does it take to get through the module?
It varies depending on it, because it goes through a lot of the steps and components. So some families might be more sophisticated and know about the types of evaluations that you can ask a school to do. Others might want to go through everything that we list and go on to the links. And
I
so
see.
there's a lot
So
of
it's very individualized.
it's individualized,
just like the transition plan needs to
just
be.
like it should be. So there's a lot of information, but people can click on to what they want to find out about, or they could just move on if they know a certain component of it.
That's great. What a wonderful tool.
The other thing that I wanted to point out about the module is that we developed it through a partnership with DOORS, the Division of Rehabilitation Services, and the module features more information about DOORS and other agencies
Great.
that are really crucial for transition.
So parents can also find out what other resources are out there in their community that they can use to help their child be successful.
Right.
Right.
And it's never too early to start learning and also contacting those agencies.
Absolutely. What are some new developments that are impacting transition in Illinois?
Well, there's one that hopefully a lot of people have been hearing about, which is employment first. So Illinois is an employment first state, and employment first is we as a state are making a commitment that people with disabilities, the first option for their adult services should be that they will be in competitive, integrated employment. And that's really having an impact on schools, because for too long, IEP teams and state agencies have sort of made an assessment about who could be preparing for employment versus who couldn't. What we found is that really almost every student with a disability can have some participation in competitive integrated employment. And so Employment First is really challenging the teams, the IEP teams, and who are planning for transition to think about how are we going to support our students to learn the skills that they need for some sort of competitive employment.
Mm-hmm. And what are some examples that a school could do to help in that regard?
Yeah, so we've been fortunate through our work that we've been able to participate in a lot of IEP teams that have thought so creatively about how to encourage competitive employment for students with pretty significant disabilities. I'll give an example of a student with autism who also had a cognitive impairment, and his school was just really excellent about saying, we're going to help you get this job at Target, and we're going to give you a job coach. So a person who had received some specialized training, but really functionally looked somewhat like an aide, a one-on-one aide or a paraprofessional who's going into Target, and initially he was providing some direct instruction in some of the tasks that were going. And then the student had an iPad where he had visual schedules that were on to complete each of the tasks necessary for target. And the job coach helped him learn how to use that visual schedule on the iPad. And then the job coach really was able to fade out his involvement so that when we stopped working with the family and with the student, he would hang out in the cafe at Target.
Excellent.
So yeah, really be able to not have to be providing that direct support to the student, and the student was really competitively employed at Target at that point, having learned those skills.
And there's some other, I'm sorry, there's some other partnerships that have been creative with hospitals and medical facilities in getting competitive employment for students with disabilities. So like Margie said, it's really important to think creatively and to work with what you have in place and supports to get the student to the point where the student can work independently once they leave the high school setting.
And is Employment First actually going out into these, say, private businesses, corporations, and trying to develop programs for these individuals, or how is it working? How does that work?
Well, so Employment First is really an effort that it's not just school, there's not an agency, one agency that's responsible for it. It's really statewide that we're working on trying to reform not just the mentality, but put in the systems in place so that people with disabilities will be competitively employed. So it's really the schools that are doing more of this work, and through various ways that their work is funded through different state agencies, for example, DOORS. I just also wanted to point out in addition to Employment First, we also have the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, which that went into effect in July of 2015.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I have to cut you off because we're almost out of time. I just want to say there are some other materials on the Equip for Equality website at www.equipforequality.org. And I want to thank Margie Wakeland and Olga Pribyl from Equip for Equality to be here to talk about this important stage of a student's life. I'm Jeannine Cordero. Thank you for watching You and the Law.